The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Welcome back to South Derbyshire again, everybody. Now I've got a run of 5 for you this week, which are really, really small. They're tiny villages. You could walk around them in a matter of minutes, and I intend to. This is kind of like a bit of gap filling as well, because we've seen some that are around these 5, but not actually these 5. We're beginning in one that's got one of the longest names in Derbyshire as well. This is Osleston and Thurvaston. Osleston and Thurvaston, Oslaf's farm. Today we're back in South Derbyshire again. It's been a little while since we could say that. Smisby seems such a long time ago. This one begins a run of 5 and they're all typical of the district, tiny hamlets. Osleston and Thurvaston kicks us off. We've mentioned this place before when we were in Sutton on the Hill. The reason for that would be the Primitive Methodist chapel at Lane Ends, which Sutton lays claim to, but it's within the boundaries of this one. Lane Ends is one of a series of hamlets which fall within the boundaries. Others include Long Lane, where most of the main features of this one actually are, Cropper, which is little more than just a scattered collection of farms and isolated houses, and of course the 2 main settlements, Osleston and Thurvaston. The entire area used to be a township in the parish of Sutton on the Hill, hence the connection to the village south of us here. In 1866, Osleston and Thurvaston became a civil parish in its own right. In 1882, part of Sutton on the Hill was transferred to the parish. There will always be a connection between the two. Layout-wise, this one doesn't have a nucleus. The population is scattered across the area, with most people living in small clumps of residences as opposed to a typical village-like setup. There are 2 lost villages in this one too. Also, there's a school, a pub, and a lot of open Derbyshire countryside. It sounds like the sort of place I'd be right at home in. Let's go walking and see if it is. We start in Thurvaston, a small hamlet which stands on Long Lane, the route of a former Roman road. A typical South Derbyshire farming settlement, this is mainly houses and farms, and there are no real landmarks. That could all change though, if developers have their way. In 2006, both Thurvaston and Sutton on the Hill were identified as sites for future housing. This was based on a survey which identified the high cost of housing and the high number of bedrooms per residence compared with the small number of children in the area. Now, purely from a personal perspective, I would strongly oppose any such building out here. We already know from walking around Sutton on the Hill just how peaceful and beautiful this part of South Derbyshire is. Unfortunately, several South Derbyshire parishes have already seen mass house building, and this one could yet be next on the list. Thurvaston used to be a lot bigger than it is today, so it's no stranger to having a larger population. Aerial photographs taken in 1948 show that the modern Thurvaston settlement is a shrunken medieval village. How far back Thurvaston goes, nobody really knows, but the Domesday Book records its name as Vedestune. At that time, it was a manor with 6 villagers and 3 smallholders. It was held by Robert under Henry de Ferrers. Recent excavations have revealed extensive archaeological remains dating back to a time before 1400. There are extensive earthworks which include a moated site and other remains of the shrunken medieval village. These remains are located to the southeast of the main village street, the loop-like layout which emanates from Long Lane. The earthworks survive as part of the modern field system of Thurvaston Farm. Even as late as 1871, Thurvaston alone was much larger than it is today. The 1871 census tells us it had a population of just under 400. A century later, the population of Thurvaston, Osleston and all the other hamlets in the modern parish was around 200. That's a major drop-off. Nowadays, Thurvaston is a peaceful and quiet village surrounded by beautiful countryside, making it popular for walkers and cyclists. Its proximity to Derby means people here don't have to travel far to get into a big city, but then of course that's one of the main reasons why housing developers like the idea of building out here. Well, I have to admit, up to now, I've had the place to myself. I've only seen one car that's come past me on these lanes, and that's kind of what I'm expecting all day out here, to be honest with you, and for you all week, because this is a part of Derbyshire which is very sparsely populated, and there ain't a lot of traffic. And to be honest with you, that's a good thing, because it means you can just hear the bird song in the background and be at one with nature, I suppose. But we are now going to hop into a car, my car, and I will be part of the little traffic there is out here as we now head towards a place called Cropper and on to Lane Ends. Now we're driving south away from Thurvaston and through a scattered linear settlement known as Cropper. Cropper has very little in the way of recorded history. In fact, it was so sparse, literally the only thing I found out about it was the fact it has a chapel. That chapel can be found in an area known as Lane Ends, which adjoins Cropper to the north of Sutton on the Hill. We already know where that chapel is, thanks to our walk around Sutton. Let's go and see it for real. This little chapel was used by the Primitive Methodist and it dates from 1838. It has two pretty iron-framed windows on the northern side of the building which have Gothic pointed arches. The plot of land this occupies has a nickname, Ranter's Corner, a reference to the worshippers who would have once used it. As a place of worship, it had space for 160 people, a crazy number given how small it is. Before services were held in it, the Primitives instead used Common Peace Farm, owned by Charles Bull. It seems its high capacity was warranted. According to records from 1851, it regularly saw 130 attend its services. The highest recorded number ever was 136. In 2019, it was being used as a store. In that year, or perhaps later, it wasn't totally clear, the building was sold at auction with widespread hope that it might be restored to its former glory. The chapel was last renovated in 1895. Back in the car, we're now off into Osleston. Osleston is very similar to Cropper in that it's a scattered and elongated settlement, but there is what I describe as a mini nucleus of population halfway up this lane. Osleston was part of Sutton on the Hill Parish until 1866 when it became its own civil parish before later merging with Thurvaston. Like its counterpart, Osleston was recorded in the Domesday Book and it had two names, Oswardistune or Oslavistune. Osleston's standout feature is a hall, a late 16th century farmhouse which has some much later additions and alterations. It forms part of a complex of buildings that stand opposite a field where there was once another medieval village. Okay, right, finally out of the way of the fuel lorries. I suppose they're important out here because, you know, these villages probably won't be on a gas main line, I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, we are now at the site of the deserted medieval village of Osleston, which is in this field over here. Unlike Thurvaston, we can actually see the remains of Osleston's former extent. These well-defined earthworks represent the desertion of the village and were identified on the same aerial photographs as those in Thurvaston taken in 1948. No medieval settlement evidence has ever been found here, but since 1968 it's been widely accepted that this was Osleston many centuries ago. Some excavations which took place here in 1998 revealed two trenches. One produced a small assemblage of medieval pottery, whilst the other revealed two parallel gullies containing post-medieval shards, which had been cut through earlier building foundations. Most of Osleston and Thurvaston's major landmarks are actually in a place called Long Lane, which takes its name from the Roman road that Thurvaston sits upon. Okay, so now we've reached the hamlet of Long Lane, which is on Long Lane. It's the Roman road, which we'll meet a couple of times in a few future episodes as well as here. Now, this is where most of Osleston and Thurvaston's amenities are. Behind me there you can see one of them. That is the primary school. We'll catch that in a second. There's also a pub to see as well, which is just down Long Lane in that direction. There's also a church as well behind the camera, but that's not part of Osleston and Thurvaston, because we're actually standing on the parish boundary right here. More on that in a bit. This area is just to the east of Thurvaston, and it contains a church, a school and a pub. Here's the school. This opened on New Year's Day in 1900. It's a small school, which figures given the nature of the area we're in. It works in partnership with the school we met a couple of years ago in Marston, Montgomery, over the border into the Derbyshire Dales. Several members of staff here are employed by both schools and work in both schools. For example, they currently share the same head teacher. Both schools are part of the Acorn Partnership, and their staff work together to develop the curriculum. Pupils of both schools have several joint days every year. A great example of that is Sports Day, which is a shared event. They also attend external sports events together too. Long Lane's pub is called the Three Horseshoes. This used to be a struggling pub until its landlord left suddenly one day, never to be seen again. It's now an award-winning gastropub that serves modern British food, wine and other drinks. Inside it has a drinker's bar, a dining room with timber beams and picture windows, and an open fire in the winter. The rear garden has patio seating and covered booths. Transforming the Horseshoes was the inaugural project from the good folk at Berkeley Inns. In 2015 they acquired it with the mission of breathing new life into what was a beautiful but neglected pub. Now it's a fantastic foodie venue for locals and visitors alike. Oh, and by the way, the name The Three Horseshoes often indicates that a blacksmith or farrier used to be nearby, as the coat of arms of the Worshipful Company of Farriers depicts three horseshoes. That was certainly the case here. Okay, and that brings us to the end of Osleston and Thurvaston, but here in Long Lane we can end one parish and start the next, because behind us there you can see we've got Long Lane's church, and this isn't within the parish boundaries, this is over the border, because the border is Osleston Lane. Yes folks, do stick around because we haven't finished with Long Lane. This drive out actually took place after I'd done the other part of it where the church is located. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.